Hello, my name is Oscar Fire, and today we are going for another book review. I don't know why I slapped that so hard. Gosh, let me do that again. That is a satisfying sound. I also just totally peaked the mic doing that. Anyway, hello, my name is Oscar Fire, and today we are talking about The Elf Queen of Shannara. I'm not gonna lie, I'm actually really I'm probably gonna talk about this one for a little longer because I'm actually really excited to talk about it. Because, so as we all know, I really love The Elf Stones of Shannara. I think it's one of the best books in the entire Shannara saga, right? This book, on second reading for me, gave it a run for its money. I actually really loved this the second time through. And I'm gonna get into it a little bit because oh gosh, like after the mild disappointment that the Druid of Shannara was, I actually really thought I would have liked the Druid of Shannara, and I didn't dislike. Like I said in the review, I didn't dislike it. It wasn't a remarkable book, really. You know, it was just kind of blah, and the plot was kind of bland and out of nowhere. This book, though, this story is solid. So where do I even begin? I suppose the best way to kind of go about it is talk about like the first half versus the second half. Because of course the first half, it's sort of first half-ish. It's not quite a 3-act structure. It's a little bit off, not off. It's a little bit different from that. As there is kind of a first, a second, and third act, but it's more of it's a little bit different. But I guess if we talk about it, the first act sort of section of it, where Ren is trying to find the elves, is honestly, it's probably some of Terry Brooks' best mystery plotting in everything he's written. And in fact, it may be the best mystery plotting. You know, even better than like what is like say Ambrose's Ultimate Fate and Elfstones, and for example. You know, just because there's just so many questions that you don't have the answers to, but because the trajectory of the book, the trajectory of the story moves forward so inexorably, it makes it very easy to stay engaged with the book because it feels like you're gonna get answers. It doesn't feel like the book's just gonna leave you hanging or anything. It feels like all this danger is destined for resolution. And I really enjoyed it. I like that. It's like, okay, but what's Ren's heritage? Like, what's going on with her? Why does something not add up here, right? Where do the elves go? What are the elves doing here on Morrowind? You know, all these questions that not just need, but demand answers. And I just think I think it's really well done. The fact, you know, that Morrowind is a hellscape in the first place itself is an interesting development. It's like, all right, the elves disappeared. Apparently, went to this island. Oh, but it's literally hell on earth. Like, how did this happen? You know, and there's, you know, and it introduces more mysteries. It's like the book has 300 mysteries, and someone manages to resolve every single one of them. And I love it. You know, I like. There's something about how absolutely and utterly satisfying this book is, that made it so worth reading. You know, because there's a lot of times where you'll have authors who might miss the mark on one or two plot points or forget a plot point here or there. But not here. I don't think there was anything that really went unresolved when it came to the elves and Ren and the magic and everything. I must admit, speaking of the magic, I must admit that it felt a little bit arbitrary that, you know, the elves were not, you know, the elves just weren't going to, explore magic anymore after the Loden returns Arborlon, what am I, English? Returns Arborlon to, to the Westland. But at the same time, there is a rational, like, what was the word I'm thinking of here? There's a rational, philosophical reason for why the elves would no longer explore the magic again. I think that the idea that the elves are in fact responsible for the shadow and threat is an interesting twist as well, because of course the elves were like a paragon of, you know, were a civilization of virtue and goodness and and basically they were kind of stereotypically kind of Tolkienian elves in the original Shannara trilogy. Of course they had their flaws, and they were not like, they weren't as noble or as distinguished as Tolkienian elves, but they most certainly filled that same niche. And here we see that the elves, in fact, are capable not just of making mistakes, but of making catastrophic mistakes that can affect everyone around them. Because, even if you think about, like, say, Fëanor's oath and everything in the Silmarillion, even that is more of a self-inflicted wound than, like, than something that hurt everyone around the Noldor, it hurt a lot of people around the Noldor, but it wasn't such a overarching thing. And the thing about it also is that when you really think about it, the Noldor's, disastrous war against Morgoth probably like stopped, probably slowed Morgoth's advance across Middle-earth for a very long time. For 400 years, they managed to stave off Morgoth's advance. And they lost eventually, but it was it's not like it was all bad. It's not like the quest to recover the Silmarils was all bad. It was mostly bad, but it wasn't all bad. And in the end, a lot of it was actually, there was a lot of good things happened in the midst of evil. And the evil would have happened anyway. But here, it was literally elven selfishness and greed, among some of the elves that created the Shadowing and imperiled, I should say, the Four Lands. And I think that's an interesting twist on it. I do very much like that Terry Brooks' elves are very different from, Tolkien's elves, given how heavily inspired he is by The Lord of the Rings in his earlier books. But I will say this, and this is something that kind of really bothered me. When I got to about the halfway point, when Ren finds the elves, and the book kind of slaps you across the face with a massive info dump, which was the worst part of the book. And it's not bad, it's just really awkward. It doesn't flow properly. It's not a natural resolution. It's not a natural narrative resolution to a lot of the mysteries, finding out that Ren is in fact an Elesadil, not an Omsford, and whatnot. It doesn't flow very naturally from the broader narrative, and I wish it did. A smart writer would find a way to kind of hide the info dump in a more clever way, rather than just having, because in my mind, Ren and Garth literally just, went through hell to get to Arborlon, and Arborlon is clearly under siege. But it's like everything's hunky-dory and normal, beyond the keel. And, that's kind of sort of the point, but as a narrative device, though, it doesn't work super well, because it just feels tonally out of place, Maybe if the meeting had occurred at, some location overlooking the besieged wall, maybe that would have worked a little better, but it's a little clumsy. But I was thinking when I got to this part about the one problem I have with Terry Brooks' elves, and that is, as much as he does a good job making his elves distinct and unique, their own unique civilization in his unique world, because the elves are ancient creatures of fairy, it feels like the elves should have a little bit more cultural grounding to them. Much like how Tolkien, created whole civilizations, and half of them don't even show up for more than 3 sentences in most of his writings. But Tolkien created whole civilizations, and then he grounded them. He gave them languages, he gave them naming conventions, he gave them, preferred professions, and, they were known for things, and they were tied to their geography. And it feels very much like Brooks doesn't ever quite grasp this with his elves. And it feels disjointed. It feels like his elves can be different, but his elves also need to have like a sort of cultural significance and weight to them that makes them feel more like they belong in the world than they do. You know, and I think it would have helped to ground the elves better for like the entire saga, rather than kind of what he does, which is just kind of half-asses it a little. It kind of feels like in the grand scheme of things. And now I'm not saying, of course, that he needs to make them like Tolkien's elves. He doesn't need to make a language or whatever, but they need to feel a little bit more grounded. Like there needs to be more to them. You know, and the thing that really got me was the naming conventions, because this bothered me reading the original trilogy as well. But naming conventions, there's just something wrong about the way he names his elves, because the elves' names are all over the place. You have elegant names like Elenro Elesidil, or hell, even Ren Elesidil is a very elegant name. You have names like Jurl Shannara, right? That feels like a unique name linguistically in this universe, right? You know, even Orin Striate. But then you have, you know, elves named Court and Dal and Triss. And it's like, okay. Or you have Barsimon Oridio. I mean, what kind of name is that? He sounds like a Genoese merchant who's trying to fleece me on fake velvet or something. Or, and I kid you not, and bear in mind, this is before the internet age. This is before the modern day where profanity became a lot more commonplace and everything. I kid you not, though, the first minister of the Elven people is named Etten Shart. I'm not sure if it's pronounced Etten or if it's supposed to be like Eaton or or Eton, or I don't know. My natural inclination is to pronounce it Eaton Shart, actually, but obviously that sounds horrible in hindsight, so I started calling him Etten Shart instead. But his name is Etten Shart, and I mean, it's an unfortunate name in hindsight, but it doesn't change the fact that it's kind of a stupid name. Like, what kind of name is Etten Shart? What? Why is that the name of the Elven First Minister? It should be something way more distinguished than that. I tell you that right now. It should be more distinguished than that. But like things like that. Like if he had just taken a little more time to make to make the elven names like a little more cohesive, it would just help to ground the elves a little bit more and make you kind of feel, not necessarily the majesty, because they're not really majestic anymore, but to feel like the weight of history behind them or something, you know? I think that would be good. But that's my primary complaint about the book. That's actually the only part of the book that really kind of like just bugs the shit out of me. Or sorry, excuse me, bugs the shart out of me, one might say. But leaving all that aside, though, the rest of the book is absolutely excellent. The tone and the setting, especially, are really good. Terry Brooks, especially in this like time frame, did a really good job of writing sort of like grim, dark sort of settings, like almost almost like an apocalyptic feeling and everything. You know, Genesis of Shannara would only be a few years from now, you know, and he does a really good job of capturing that. The feeling of dread on the island of Morrowind is actually incredible. I can imagine being in the forests and the jungles and the volcanic fog, the Vog, you know, floating overhead, obscuring the sun and the stars and the moon, you know, and making, you know, turning everything eerie, and monsters everywhere. Monsters of the Elves' own making, no less. Wandering around everywhere. I think that's just... Oof. I actually felt legitimate tension while reading this book. And that's very rare. When I'm reading books, it is very rare for me to actually feel like proper tension. You know, there's a certain... It's very hard just to convey that exact feeling in writing, in my honest opinion. Even though I'm very good at visualizing things, you know, And it, honestly, it's one of the most surprising things I found out is that people don't visualize things when they read, which is why some people don't read. Like that realization, like that people, some people out there don't visualize things while they are reading, actually kind of like, it's like, oh, that's why some people don't enjoy reading, because they're just seeing words, but they're not seeing the images those words are supposed to evoke. But I can. And oh my gosh, Morrowind felt like a nightmare land. You know, it sucked me in every time I got back into the book, you know. I would go to lunch and I would just pick up the book and start reading, and I'm just there again. And I'm watching this journey and this adventure, and it's not really much of an adventure. Well, it's an adventure in the strictest sense, but it's a terrible adventure. And I love it. Terry Brooks did that thing again where he kills almost the entire party. It's something I hate. I wish he wouldn't do that. It's like Terry, more than two people can survive the adventure, you know. But instead, it's at the end of the adventure, it's Ren and Triss, and Stressa the Splinter's cat, and Fawn the Tree Squeak. I still have trouble visualizing what the Tree Squeak actually looks like, because it says it's very human-looking hands. I'm just like, it does not create good, it doesn't create like weird, it creates weird mental images. I can't properly visualize what a Tree Squeak would possibly look like. But those are all that survive. You know, out of a party of what is essentially 11 when you think about it. It's 9 that sets out from Arlon, and, you know, 11 if you count the 2 animals, right? And and he kills almost everyone, and it's just, Terry, please, just, people can live, you know. You know, but instead, what happens, you know, Orin Striate dies almost immediately in just a freak accident, as it's described. You know, Ellenroe Alesidil dies from swamp fever. You know, Court dies, you know, valiantly. Dahl, the other home guard, you know, gets betrayed. You know, surprisingly, it was Triss of all people, the captain of the home guard, who actually survives the entire adventure. That's usually the kind of person that Terry Brooks kills first. Lord knows he kills the home guard in almost every other single book he writes when they show up. So, you know what? Credit where it's due. He did not kill Triss, but he killed Garth, and killed Gavilan, and he killed Eowyn. And yeah, I mean, I'll tell you right now, in terms of all the books where Terry kills a lot of his characters, this is probably the most logical and sound version of him doing that. You know, it doesn't feel nearly as stupid, I guess is the best way to put it. You know, it doesn't feel as arbitrary. Because I mean, in the Elfstones of Shannara, you know, he kills off Will and Ambryl's escort, you know, within 3 days of them setting out, basically. And that's like, that's just like, what's the point of giving them an escort? They might as well just go on their own. You know, there's no point in doing that. At least here, he spaces out the deaths. He gives the deaths are from different threats, and it helps to serve to ratchet up the tension in a much more meaningful way, because yes, there's threats here and there's threats there, but they're all different. You know, they're all different threats. And they kill in different ways. You know, and Dahl dying from Dahl, D-A-L, by the way. Caption. For future me, caption that. But him dying from betrayal because Gavilan basically loses his mind. Gavilan and Alesidil, you know, thinking that he can harness the magic and save the elves is, you know... and that is also... he is also an interesting character. I like the idea of a character who is basically good, but he's naive. Because that's what he is. He thinks that they can harness the magic that the Loden, you know, the elf stone of the, you know, the elf stone that can transport Arbalon, he thinks that he can take the, he can take the magic of the Loden and, and use it to save the elves and destroy the monsters and return everything to the way it was. And it's just like, you not see the situation around you, but at the same time, you can understand his motivations, because he's one of those people who thinks that the magic will save them, and he's not wrong for thinking in that way. He's just wrong for not seeing reality for what it is. And his story is very tragic. It's very tragic, and I'm a little bit weirded out by the way he makes romantic overtures toward Ren, given that technically they're cousins. Not very clear what level of cousin. I mean, if it's second cousin on, maybe it's not as weird, right? But if they're first cousins, ugh. Right? So, but at the same time, it helps to. I feel like the romantic overtures is a little bit unnecessary. It didn't have to be there. But at the same time, it's kind of like, okay, I can understand where this is going, though. It gives something else to kind of beat Ren up with. And oh my gosh, that woman gets beaten. She gets beaten up, not physically, but emotionally. And I feel the emotions. I actually, Ren is actually one of the characters that is it's one of the few characters in the entire series where you kind of really feel what she's going through. You go, and it doesn't, and Terry Brooks doesn't delve too many times into repeating the same emotional concept over and over again. It's like, okay, we get it. She's going to remember this for the rest of her life. Just don't say that. We know she's going to remember for the rest of her life because it traumatized her, and he doesn't do that here. And I'm so proud of him. I'm so proud of him for not doing that in this book. Much. He does it a couple of times. He does stuff like that. But it's not as near. It's one of his big foibles when writing things, and he doesn't do it here, and I'm so proud of him. But he does a very good job of creating a protagonist who has to struggle and suffer, and indeed who breaks a couple of times, and not going too far in one way or the other. She's not too strong, but she's not too weak. She's exactly what she needs to be in the moment, and I think that's perfect. I think that actually makes her almost borderline a perfect character in a lot of ways. I think that at towards the very end, when she has to kill Garth because Garth is poisoned, but he's not just poisoned, he's transforming into a shadow in himself, and she has to kill him, by his request. I felt the hurt there. I felt the pain, and I think that's so well done. Really, it's a brilliant novel, and I feel like I'm gushing, but I can't not gush. I can't not be so happy at how much I enjoyed this book. It's just that great. But yeah, it's something else. It's something else. From beginning to end, except for that little bit in the middle, like I said, from beginning to end, it's an amazing book. And of course, there's a little interludes as well, where we come back to Walker Bow and trapped in limbo Paranor for a little while, and then he finally makes a decision to become a druid, and he takes on the spirit of Al-Anon, and Paranor is back in the world. The pieces are starting to fall into place. Cole is deliberately let go with that cloak. Can't remember what it was. Shroud Slip, was it? That's clearly transforming him into a Shadowin, probably. And of course, Par-Arms for Damson Rhee. Trying to, in that one chapter. And it's just okay, he brings it back. He just brings he brings the other characters back in little drips and drabs at just the right moments where it's because I think he understood how intense this book was. And I think Terry Brooks understood how intense this book was and decided to use these little moments, even though the par bit especially is a little bit is kind of ooh. kind of intense, but he uses them. He uses these little moments, these 4 chapters, I think it is, 4 total, to kind of bring the, to kind of ratchet the tension back down again. I think that's really smart and helps to set up the Talismans of Shannara, which is the 4th and final book of the Heritage of Shannara series. And that reminds me, I'm gonna have to buy the next series. I think I'm gonna do the Voyage of the Jewel Shannara after this. I think I'm just gonna read it in the order that I read it. And I'm pretty sure it's the Voyage of the Jewel Shannara, then the High Druid of Shannara, and then I went back because I'm pretty sure some of these were, because I'm 90% certain most of these were written beforehand. But then I'm going to read probably The Word in the Void, and then Genesis of Shannara, and then Legends of Shannara, and then come back to Dark Legacy, because I'm pretty sure that's the order I read it in. But anyway. Alright, I gushed enough. It has been 26-ish minutes. I hope you enjoyed. I like it when I like the books I'm reading, because it really makes me, because I want to be more excited. I want to be excited about the books. I don't want to be disappointed. I don't want to be frustrated. I want to enjoy what I'm reading, and well, hot damn, I enjoyed what I read this time. That was an adventure. That was an incredible journey, and I can't remember how Talismans resolves, but I'm interested to see how it resolves. I'm really interested to see how it resolves. Anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Remember to check out my Twitch channel to see where the bulk of my content is right now. And I'll be back with another review when I finish Talismans of Shannara. So, thank you again, and until next time, everybody.